Hello my long-lived friends. Today I will be reviewing Greg Doucette's cookbook. The main goal of this review will be to determine whether Greg Doucette's cookbook deserves the moniker of the Cancer Cookbook. The reason I say this is that in a recent interview on my podcast, I mentioned, perhaps carelessly, that Greg Doucette's cookbook seemed to me that it would be more aptly called the Cancer Cookbook. In reality, at the time, I had not read Greg's cookbook. I had spent a little bit of time in the last 2 months watching Greg's videos. Maybe I'll get more into that in a little bit. But the point is, I made some assumptions without having read it myself. After that video, I got a plethora of requests to review his cookbook. I was not intending to buy the cookbook and review it because this is not usually my kind of video. But a subscriber to my channel gifted me the cookbook, and so I had really no excuse. And I was also curious, so I read through it. And after reading through it, I took quite a few notes, which I have in front of me, and I will be reviewing these notes with you on camera during this discussion. One note, however, this discussion will probably be long-winded, although I may cut certain bits of it to make it a little bit more consistent because I have to go through so many pages. But it will probably be definitely not as entertaining as Greg's videos, and I will definitely not be screaming or really attracting your attention that much. But what I'll be doing is using this as an example for which other people can learn from. So like Greg himself says in his videos, and after a while, originally I was a little bit, I thought it was not, I don't know how to describe it, but a lot of people don't like the fact that Greg makes a lot of videos about other people. Originally I thought that this was, clout chasing or negative, but really actually he does try to impart his views through those videos, and it is respectful. So that's sort of what I'm going to do here to him, but to the audience, so people can learn some lessons from it. I do think that if you watch this video, you will learn some interesting things, and even if you're not interested in his cookbook. But I also think that if you are interested in his cookbook, you'll probably find this very interesting. So to begin, I want to make some notes. I just want you guys to know I will often be looking down at my notes, and that is because I don't want to forget anything. I took some detailed notes. I'm going to be reviewing. So how this will be structured is, first I will give some introductory remarks, then I will comment on the structure of his cookbook, then I will comment on the major themes of the cookbook. Then I will go into 7 separate recipes. And after those 7 recipes, I will give you my detailed opinion on a diet that would be based out of this cookbook, specifically how it would affect someone's health. The reason I say that is that while Greg Doucette is most known for fitness, he is actually, if you go to his YouTube channel, you'll find that he mentions health in his YouTube banner. And he does talk about health often. My impression is that he confuses a little bit health with fitness, which are not necessarily the same thing. And also that, but nonetheless, he may be increasing people's health because certain people may be living very unhealthy lifestyles, or they may be, for example, obese. And he is particularly good, it seems, at helping people reduce body fat without tiring themselves too much along the way, or using too much self-discipline. One of his lessons that he tries to impart to viewers is that the way to being fit is not through discipline, but through finding hacks in your diet that can make your food palatable and satisfying without being very high calorie. And he does do this in his diet. We'll get into that in a second. So to begin, I want to make some notes ahead of time. This video is not a video bashing Greg Doucette, and it's also not a video that I'm making hoping for a response from Greg. I highly doubt that he would respond to this video because it will not be neither bashing him nor touting his, how excellent the diet is. I will try to be impartial and try to be genuine and honest in my review. I will try to comment on the positive elements as well as the negative elements, as well as what could have been done better. I read the entire book. The book is 100 pages long. Well, before I get into that, let me just say, by the way, also, I'm not going to be very consistent here. I'm still not used to talking to a camera, so it may be a little bit awkward. I hope you bear with me. Maybe you would like to listen to this instead with audio. If you have YouTube Premium, you can just listen to it in audio while you're at the gym. Or maybe I'll also put this on my podcast so people can listen to it there free of ads. Anyway, first thing I want to say, this is not a video bashing Greg Doucette. In fact, I do admire Greg Doucette. I admire two things in particular about him. Number one, he is an extremely successful powerlifter. His bench press record is extremely admirable and absolutely no joke. Now, obviously, he is built for the bench press. He has short arms and all these other kind of factors. But I really believe personally that he pushed himself to achieve. He has a lot of records in different things. Some of them, some of them are odd. Like he tried to go for a popcorn record on his video. He's a competitive guy. But certainly his bench press record is really admirable. And that's one thing I respect about him. Another thing I respect about him is that he is an extremely successful YouTuber. And this is the main reason I've been watching his videos lately. Previously, I watched Greg Doucette's videos about a year or so ago, when he had, at the time, I don't know when it was, but he had around 60,000 subscribers. That's when I came across him originally. I watched his videos. I found him very personable and enjoyable to watch and entertaining. Personally, I was not able to learn much from his videos because they were mostly basic, and I had been reading about anabolic androgenic steroids since 2003 or so, and most of what he was talking about was regard to that and some basic stuff. But his channel is not meant to be for the advanced lifter or for the advanced health aficionado, so that's not taking anything away from him. But I stopped watching the videos because, actually I stopped just because I wasn't watching videos for a while, and then when I came back to them I found that he was screaming a lot in his videos, which was to me less entertaining and very difficult to watch. But I understand that he does this because it must yield him some benefit. And this is the second thing that I really respect about him, which is he is probably the most impressive fitness YouTuber, fitness and health YouTuber in the way he grew. So when I first thought of this cookbook, or when I first mentioned it, I think he had 500,000 subscribers. Today he has over 600,000. Last year, whenever it was I was watching him, he had 60,000. This rate of growth has never been duplicated by anyone in the fitness industry that I know of except Rich Piana. So he is extremely successful. He's also a very intelligent guy. You can tell from listening to him, even when he talks about things that he's not knowledgeable about, like fasting, intermittent or periodic fasting, which I've made a video about before because I was also requested to do that. But even when he talks about things he doesn't know about, you can tell he is a smart person. He probably has a high IQ. He's quick thinking, and he's very respectable in that sense. I also wanted to mention that he seems like he's a very nice guy, so I actually have absolutely no ill will to him, and I am fond of him as well. So I wanted to say all of that first. I think I covered everything there. Okay, so that's about basically the disclaimer to this video. I should also mention I'm on my 5th day of a fast. Greg would not approve at all, but I'm on my fifth day of a fast, so I'm going to be a bit slower than I normally would be, and you have to bear with me, but hopefully this will be very informative. So, to describe the book is 70 pages of recipes. It's actually 100 pages in total, but there's an introduction and there's a sort of a reference section at the end, which is very interesting because the reference section contains mostly like calorie counting, macro counting, things like that, tables, and actually contains no references, ironically. But so it's very well written and it's very entertaining. It's easy to read. You can finish it in a setting easily. The instructions are very easy to follow. It has sections on different kinds of meals. He has a breakfast section, a sandwiches section, a wrap section, a dinner section, a snacks section, desserts, and shakes. The other ones are pretty self-explanatory, but the dinner section contains basically pasta or pizza. And the dessert section, the snack section contains one chips and guacamole recipe, but the rest is protein bars that are highly processed. And so that's just to give you an idea of what the sections look like. By the way, I'm going to try my best in this video not to give the audience too much about Greg's recipes, so that if you're interested in it, you can purchase it yourself. I will tell you at the end whether I think it's worth the $100. Another thing is that, so that's covering the structure of the book, which is 100 pages, as I said, 70 pages of recipes. The themes of the book is, number one, he has a lot of bread throughout it. It seems he's very fond of bread. I do recall he had a video a long time ago, which I didn't watch, but it was about bread versus rice, and he is very fond of bread. And you will tell through the cookbook that he is extremely fond of bread. So there's a lot of bread. It is generally a low fat, as low as he could be, cookbook. So he's very much fond of being low fat and relatively higher in carbohydrates. He's also very high in protein. I should mention that as well. It is a low calorie for volume of food cookbook, which is where I think he says dense. When he says dense foods, I think he means low calorie for volume, not nutrient dense. So that may be just a linguistic misunderstanding. I think he knows what he means. But originally I thought he meant that it was nutrient dense, which, as we'll see, it's not. So there's a lot of processed ingredients. That's another thing. Now that's why I originally called it the Cancer Cookbook before I actually read it myself. It has a lot of processed ingredients. I generally noticed a year or so ago when I saw him shopping, he buys a tremendous amount of processed foods. And another couple of themes, there's a lot of cocoa powder in the recipes that are meant to be sweet. And there's a lot of sucralose, which isn't necessarily a negative thing, but we'll get into that later. And there's a lot of berries, and the cookbook is very easy to make, as I already said. So let's get started now with the recipes. I'll cover 7 recipes with you. I'll discuss the pros and cons of each. I'll try to be a little bit cryptic about the ingredients so that I don't give anything away out of respect for Greg. And then after I get through these recipes, be sure not to stop in the middle and stop watching the video, because the most important part really is the end of the video, where I go over the details of what I think what kind of impact this would have on health. Because as I said, Greg does promote himself as a health conscious person, and he does often talk about health, where he actually, I think, means fitness. Although, we'll get into the details of this in a second. So I'm going to take my time with this video. You may even have to put it on 1.25, the normal speed, or 1.5, but I think that should work. And since I'm fasting, this is much easier for me. So to begin with, and by the way, when I've selected these 7 recipes, I've tried not to pick what I would consider the worst recipes, or to try to be unfair. So I have some that I think are fair. I have picked, of course, a few that I think are less than healthy. We're beginning with one that is less than healthy from the sandwich section. It's called the ham and cheese sandwich. So basically what this involves is he makes a ham and cheese sandwich, which actually I didn't write it down, but I think he fries it. In either case, it doesn't matter. He basically includes a selection of breads that you can choose from. Now, to his credit, he offers Ezekiel bread, which is a less processed bread, but he focuses on Icon Meals protein bread and P28 protein bread. And he also offers what he calls, I forgot what he calls it, but white bread, normal white bread. So that's the first ingredient. The second ingredient is a low-fat cheese, sliced cheese. And the third ingredient is a low-fat butter. And the fourth ingredient is ham, sliced ham. So you can immediately tell that every single one of those ingredients is a highly processed food. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is, although the butter is reduced fat, which I applaud him on, because the fat in butter is saturated fat. Saturated fat is arguably, now there are people in the ketogenic world who do not agree with this, but the medical consensus to some degree is that saturated fat, it plays a causal role in the development of atherosclerosis, which is plaque buildup in your arteries, which leads eventually to cardiovascular disease. So he includes a reduced fat butter, but it is still butter and does have saturated fat. Now I'm going to include a video card here where I discuss the health. I use a lot of papers to give my opinion on the role of saturated fat in heart disease. So I won't get into the details here. Check out that video if you'd like. And by the way, I always try to put these cards in the right place, but they end up being a little bit before or after, so you might have to look for them. And I'll be doing this throughout the video because I don't want to be too long-winded, so you can check out my videos. My videos have a lot of citations, and I try to be, when I look through papers to come up with my opinion on a subject, I try not to take isolated papers that have a single view. I try to look at both sides of it, and I try to be as comprehensive as possible. So as I said, there is some disagreement about saturated fat. I'm of the opinion that saturated fat probably plays a causal role in heart disease. It certainly does raise LDL cholesterol. Now, off topic, I did see a video a while ago in which Greg Doucette reviewed his blood work. And Greg Doucette actually has an LDL cholesterol, a calculated LDL cholesterol. It was not an actual LDL cholesterol count, but he had a calculated LDL cholesterol of around 75, if I recall correctly. And that is actually the amount at which it is thought that you do not develop atherosclerotic plaque. Now, he didn't show his picture, to my knowledge, when he didn't show his name on the blood test, so it's possible that it wasn't his. But if it is his, he certainly would be considered to have good cholesterol health. So I want to say that to his credit. Now, the third thing is the bread is highly processed and not nutritious. This is the opposite of a dense food. And it is also a starch, and starches are associated with increased, now I have to provide a little bit of background here, LDL cholesterol is found in LDL particles. A gentleman named Ron Krauss, not sure which university he teaches at, but he's very well known in lipidology, which is a study of lipids, a subset of cardiology. And Ron Krauss is the person who, I'll link an article to him here, but you can also go on YouTube and watch some of his lectures. He's the person who basically popularized, or maybe even discovered, the fact that LDL cholesterol count is not all, or LDL particles, which are low density lipoprotein particles that travel through your bloodstream, are not created equally in terms of the amount that they affect plaque buildup. Specifically, small, dense LDL particles are more likely to get lodged in the arterial wall, whereas large, fluffy, buoyant particles are less likely to get lodged there. So what is known is that starches and simple carbohydrates of that kind, like bread, are more likely to change the profile of your LDL particles more into the smaller particles. So this is, in my opinion, bread is quite unhealthy, especially white bread. Although he does offer this slightly less processed version, which is the Ezekiel bread. Now, the next problem is that both the cheese and the ham contain nitrites and nitrose compounds. Now, I'm not going to get into the detail of what these are. I will add a card here. The card is about a video called Smoked Meats, but in the video I go into detail about the dangers of processed meats, and I also talk about nitrites. And nitrites are also found, and N-nitrose compounds are also found in cheeses. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that processed meats are the only kind of meat. Vegans will tell you differently, but processed meats are the only kind of meats that are consistently associated with cancer and consistently associated with worse mortality outcomes, meaning people die younger on average when they eat processed meats frequently. So processed meats include ham, they include pepperoni, those kind of things, what you would find at an Italian deli. So that's one problem, and of course you're combining the and the reason why it's a problem, a couple of reasons. One of them is polyaromatic hydrocarbons, but the other ones, which you found mainly in smoked meats, but the other one is nitrites, and those are also found in the cheese. So you're combining a lot of nitrites in this meal. I would consider this a high nitrite meal. Finally, the sandwich has 38 grams of protein, which is a high protein content, which I deem to be unhealthy, but I will describe to you at the end of this video why I think it to be unhealthy. Let's move on to the second recipe. This recipe is called the Chow Carb Proto Pasta with Beef Tomato Sauce. Now, this basically contains a low carbohydrate, high protein pasta, and well, I'll go through the ingredients with you briefly, but not to be too detailed. It's a low carbohydrate, high protein pasta, and a prepared, processed, bought tomato and basil sauce for the pasta, as well as extra lean ground beef, as well as, and these are all unspecified, which means he doesn't even say which ones to use, but he says vegetables, a certain amount of vegetables, some kinds of spices and condiments, and some kind of cooking spray. Now, the good part about this is that the cooked tomatoes that are found in this tomato sauce are actually have a higher antioxidant potential than raw tomatoes. So tomatoes are, as I've mentioned before on my channel, one of the only two vegetables or fruits, in addition to carrots, that are consistently shown to have higher antioxidant potential when they're cooked. Now, other fruits and vegetables sometimes show this, but tomatoes are particularly well known for that. So it is a good idea to cook your tomatoes when you want to eat them, and the tomato sauce certainly has that. The drawback to buying a store-bought tomato sauce is that they often don't have the seeds or the skin of the tomato, in which case you lose quite a bit of the phytochemicals. But I understand that maybe for his audience it is not convenient to make your own tomato sauce, and maybe they're younger and don't necessarily know how to. And in general, in his cookbook, he tries to make the ingredients and the directions as simple to understand as possible. So I understand that. But that is a good point, the cooked tomatoes. Now, as for the problems, first of all, well, I've already mentioned the fact that the processed tomato sauce may not have the skin and seeds, so we know that. The second thing is that this high protein, low carbohydrate pasta is certainly a very high processed food. And we'll talk about processed food again toward the end of the video when I talk about my major view of what kind of health this diet would promote. The third thing is the amount of protein. Again, it's 49 grams of protein, so this is a high protein meal, and to me this is a drawback. But I understand a lot of people using this cookbook are bodybuilders, but it is a little bit inappropriate then to call these meals healthy. That's what I would say. But we'll get into more detail later. So the final thing is, and this really surprised me, is that he didn't specify whatsoever what kind of vegetables to include. He just said a certain portion of vegetables, put them in there. And I thought this was a really big missed opportunity. Not all vegetables are created equal, and not all phytochemicals are created equal. Some vegetables have more phytochemicals or more interesting or useful phytochemicals that we know of, and some have higher antioxidant potential. And although the antioxidant theory of aging has been sort of disproved, antioxidants certainly reduce cellular damage that we do in our body and could potentially reduce the incidence of cancer in the long term. So in my opinion, if I was making a cookbook, which I never thought to do before, but if I was making one, I would try to advise the readers on maybe the biggest bang for the buck that they could get when choosing vegetables. You know, of course you want to choose vegetables you like, but you don't want to choose vegetables that are nearly useless, like lettuce, for example. And you also don't want to choose vegetables that have very high nitrates, for example. Like I used to eat beetroot. I stopped eating beetroot because it has a lot of nitrates. So you want to choose, so there's sometimes things that you want to avoid in vegetables, and sometimes you just want to get the most bang for your buck in terms of the phytochemicals that can help your body and heal your body, which is what vegans always talk about when they say their diet is so healthy. We cannot be vegans, but still optimize our choices in terms of vegetables. So there's that's one thing. And the other thing is he doesn't specify the spices. Now this is a secondary issue, obviously not as impactful as the vegetables, but again, certain spices have tremendous health benefits, and maybe they won't suit the taste of the ingredients, but he could at least have I didn't mention this, but the cookbook is very well organized and easy to read, but he could have still given, without making it too dense, given some, maybe on the appendix, he could have given some advice on which spices are very helpful with some citations so people could look into it. And finally, the cooking spray, he also did not specify what kind of cooking spray to use for frying, and I do think that was a missed opportunity as well. Not all oils are created equal, and it's a good way to impart knowledge and be helpful of your audience. So basically this shows sort of a lack of focus on optimizing health. The third recipe that we'll go through is called the cauliflower mashed potatoes. It's from the dinners section. Now here basically what he does is he boils potatoes and cauliflower, and then he blends them, and then he eats them with sour cream. And so his ingredient list doesn't specify whether the potatoes or cauliflower will be organic. He includes fat-free sour cream, which is probably a good idea because it's a cream. You don't want that kind of fat too much. He includes some kind of gum, baking powder, and finally unspecified again spices. So basically this one I don't have much positive to say about it. Of course it is great to always eat plant matter in general. You're always going to get some kind of phytochemicals. However, there are some issues here. I felt like there were missed opportunities. So in terms of the cooking method, that's my major issue. First of all, boiling cauliflower is the worst way to cook them in terms of retaining phytochemicals and antioxidant status of the foods you're eating. So steaming produces the highest antioxidant status, even higher than eating them raw, by the way. Whereas Whereas in terms of the actual so antioxidant status is one thing and phytochemicals are another thing. So in terms of phytochemicals, steaming also produces the best results in terms of carotenoids, but microwaving actually produces better results in terms of quercetin. We'll talk more about quercetin later, and phenolics. These are phytochemicals. A lot of people supplement with quercetin. I do myself. It's a very powerful and promising phytochemical that's been isolated and used in supplements. So basically, instead of boiling, he should have steamed both of them. And he probably would not have lost that much out of it, and his audience or the cookbook readers would have gained a lot of phytochemicals that would be health preserving. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, so the boiling also harms the phytochemicals of the potato. So the boiling harms the phytochemicals. Sorry, I got lost there a bit. I have a lot of notes, but the boiling harms the phytochemicals of the potato as well as the antioxidant quality. And steaming or microwaving would have been better. So overall, he could have just steamed both of them and been okay with it. I also think it was a missed opportunity not to tell the audience to use organic cauliflower or potatoes if possible. I'll include a card here of a video I did discussing whether organic food is really worth buying, and you should watch that video so you can understand the dangers of particularly fruit or vegetables that are not organic. Not all of them are as dangerous as others. It depends how many it depends on the crop, whether it requires a lot of pesticides or not. But as you'll learn from the video, pesticides are damaging to children. They're damaging to pregnant women who have not just the pesticides, I mean the inorganic foods. And the pesticides to farmers frequently give them cancer just from living on a farm. So that is a serious concern. And this is another reason it could be called the Cancer Cookbook, because at no point during it does he mention organic foods, except for one organic sauce, as I mentioned earlier. That prepared sauce was an organic one and he had a specific brand for it. So I think this was a missed opportunity. Of course, many of his viewers maybe cannot afford to buy organic food all the time, but it would be great to mention to them, hey, this would really help your health. So that's one thing. And then again, he missed another opportunity with the spices to specify which spices can be healthy. There are studies showing that even just blended spices together in a drink can significantly impact health. And he does mention one great spice later on. So that's one thing. The final thing I wanted to say on this subject was the potatoes. The potatoes are one of the most insulinogenic foods. And what that means is that it is a starch that produces a rapid response in insulin in the body. In the last section of this video, I'll tell you guys why that is dangerous for health. So the next section is the protein P28 pizza, which is again from the dinners. Now, there were a couple of pizza options. I covered a pasta option, but this one I picked because, well, I don't know why really. There were two bison ones. I wanted to pick one of those. So first of all, basically what it does is fry onions, mushrooms, peppers, and bison meat. And then he toasts a P28 flatbread, which is a high protein bread. And then he adds the ingredients on top and puts them in the oven. And of course, I hope I'm not giving too much up of the recipe. Really, if you like these kind of recipes, you should buy his book. It's really easy to read. But I'll tell you about that later, my final opinions. The point is, it contains this flatbread, the P28 flatbread. It contains fat-free, again, sliced cheese. It contains bison. It contains a low-fat pizza sauce. And it contains, he says in the ingredients, peppers, onions, mushrooms, but he also includes the spinach. And sorry guys, my video cut off as it often does. So he says it's up to you to decide which ingredients you want to include. He also includes spinach there. So finally, he does an, again, unspecified cooking spray and an unspecified spices. Now, the first thing I have the problem with is iron. So, and I'll explain to you guys how iron affects health in a little bit, but let me just give you some background on iron and foods. So there are a couple of kinds of iron. One is called heme iron and one is called non-heme iron. Heme iron is much more absorbable than non-heme iron. Non-heme iron is mostly what you find in plants and vegetables, but in meats you find heme iron, which is easily absorbable. In fact, if you consume an iron supplement, you will stop absorbing as much iron from non-heme iron, like from plants and vegetables, because when you have more iron, your body starts to reduce the amount that it retains iron, but this doesn't happen for heme iron. So even if you're taking an iron supplement, your body will keep accruing iron. So that's one thing. Bison meat, according to one study, there are different figures, but I'll cite the study here. There's one study shows that bison meat has about 44% higher iron than beef. And that is a tremendous amount. Now, I haven't been able to find many studies that compare bison meat with other kinds of meat, but I did find many studies that compare beef to other kinds of meat. So since you know that bison meat is 44% higher in iron than beef, this should put everything in perspective for you, because that's a tremendous amount higher. Some studies even show higher than that. So now I just want to show you guys an example of non-bison meat. So in terms of heme iron, beef has the highest amount of all meats, other than bison, right? That we commonly eat. So the second highest would be ostrich and horse. Now in terms of non-heme iron, which is again the less absorbable version, the highest amount found in commonly eaten foods, well, I don't know how common this is, but ostrich as well as a lamb. Those are the highest ones there. In terms of uncooked, because this changes when you cook the meat, right? In terms of uncooked, the total iron is highest in ostrich, followed by beef. But in terms of cooked meat, beef has the highest, followed, depending on the slice. Sometimes it's beaten by ostrich and lamb also. So, but these are always beaten by bison. So bison is the highest iron meat of any meat we commonly consume. Now he also pan fries the beef, and that is the method of cooking that reduces the iron the least. So this is a lot of iron you're getting in this meal. And iron is much more absorbable when the iron is eaten in a protein-rich meal also. And this is a very high protein meal, as are most of his meals. So next, while highly nutritious, and I used to eat spinach as well myself because it is really micronutrient dense. And this is where you would call dense. That is something that's dense. But it is also the highest, has the highest iron levels of any vegetable rated by the US Department of Agriculture. Now, I don't have a citation for this because it's online, but maybe I'll put the link in the comments below. If somebody asks about it, you can check it out yourself. Spinach has a lot of iron. So, how does this impact health? Well, iron, first of all, is very much associated with cancer. Iron levels are thought to be carcinogenic in a person. And this is an outcome of research that has occurred in the last 15 years or so. But oncologists or doctors who specialize in cancer are beginning to consider iron levels to be a serious concern with regard to cancer. Iron is also associated with insulin resistance, which is something that commonly plagues bodybuilders as well as obese people. And it's also associated with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and insulin resistance are very much intertwined. It is unclear which one causes which, but it is thought by many people as well as educators on YouTube, including Jason Fung, that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease causes insulin resistance, and this cycle eventually leads to both cirrhosis of the liver in an extreme case, or at least steatosis of the liver, but more importantly also to diabetes, to type 2 diabetes. So iron basically is indirectly associated with type 2 diabetes. It is also associated with a number of neurodegenerative conditions, including mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's disease, as well as Parkinson's disease. So this is a serious concern. There are people like myself who like to consume foods that have a lot of iron. Specifically, I like to consume a lot of liver, and that's why I have been phlebotomizing, which means bloodletting for the purpose of getting iron out of your blood, so you have less iron in your body. And therapeutic, a lot of people in the longevity community are also looking into therapeutic phlebotomies. Now, bodybuilders do that because they want to reduce the viscosity of their blood, or the thickness of their blood, but the longevity people want to get rid of the iron. So to me, this meal that has potentially spinach, but definitely bison, is a concerning meal in terms of health. With that said, if he had mentioned in the meal that, you know, this has a lot of iron, maybe choose the beef section instead, which also has a lot of iron, but that's less extreme. I mean, bison versus beef, sure, it's a leaner meat, but it has so much more iron. I just feel like it would have been nice to mention that so that the audience could know what they're getting themselves into. Now, I won't get into this, but maybe the cooking, I'll just ignore this section, but the cooking of the vegetables, the frying may not have been the best way to maintain the phytochemicals, but that's a little bit arguable. Now, again, the P28 bread is a highly processed food again, and as I said earlier, this is a very high protein meal. It has 69 grams, 69 grams of protein, which is about what a healthy, longevity aspiring, health aspiring person should eat during their whole day. So it is a very high protein meal. And I understand a lot of the people watching this are bodybuilders who require protein either to activate mTOR and therefore IGF-1 to grow their muscles, to induce a certain state in the body. But still, it's important for people to know when something is called healthy, that high protein, we'll get into it later, that it's not actually healthy. So the fifth recipe, and we've only got 3 more, including this one. So this one's called the Holiday Chocolate Protein Bar. It is in the snacks section. Now, this is going to be a little complicated, so I want to tell you guys. So basically, he makes a protein bar out of a lot of ingredients. I'll get into things. So the ingredients are, he uses the RYSE, I don't know if it's called rice, chocolate, peanut butter, whey protein powder. I believe, though I'm not certain, that he's sponsored by them. He also uses liquid Vitafiber or Fiber Yum. He uses Walden's Farms chocolate syrup, which is a 0 calorie, I think, chocolate syrup. He recommends coca powder, but does not specify the brand. And he recommends an unknown brand again of Christmas colored chocolate chips. Now, I don't know if he's kidding there. He is a funny guy, and maybe that's what he meant there. But in either case, he doesn't specify the brand. And you'll realize in a second that that's very important. And again, a couple of other things, caramel extract and unknown kind of cooking spray. Again, he doesn't specify the cooking spray. So those are the ingredients and my comments on them. First of all, the whey protein, I've looked into it. It includes a coca powder, but it does not specify anything about the coca powder, where it's sourced, or any of the qualities of it. And I'll talk about why that's important in a second. It also includes the artificial sweetener sucralose. Sucralose is found throughout his cookbook in a variety of the meals. However, I'm not necessarily against sucralose. I just wanted to mention that. Walden Farms is a calorie-free chocolate syrup, again using unspecified coca as well as sucralose. Liquid Vitafiber is an isomalto oligosaccharide. An oligosaccharide is saccharide. An oligosaccharide is a larger or medium chain saccharide, which saccharide is a sugar. You have disaccharides, monosaccharides, you have trisaccharides, and you have polysaccharides, which are more than 10. What's notable about these, so this is for the liquid Vitafiber as well as for the Fiber Yum. What they are basically is carbohydrates that pass through the digestive system and are able to act as prebiotics, which means they feed the microbiome. And so the first one, liquid Vitafiber, is made from peas. The second one, Fiber Yum, is made from tapioca that comes from the cassava plant. So that's that there. They are low glycemic index, and I'll tell you in a second what I feel about that. He does not, again, bother to mention the source of the coca powder, and he does not bother to mention the cooking spray kind. And again, he does not mention the Christmas colored chocolate chips, where they should come from. Now, the good part of this meal is that it is the fiber-rich isomalto oligosaccharides are, look, they're a highly processed food, but to me, I felt that they were a creative addition. And in terms of maybe a cheat meal, they're probably a good idea if you're going to use a cheat meal. They look to me like, even though they're processed, they probably provide quite a bit of benefit. So I applaud him for this. The second one, though, is it seems from what I don't think he could overlook this. Now, obviously, he didn't mention a lot of optimization of plants and those kind of things so far, plant food. But I don't think that he's aware that coca powder frequently contains extremely dangerous levels of cadmium. Cadmium is one of 4 very toxic metals that we are concerned about consuming, such as arsenic and mercury. I'll put a video up here in which I discuss the toxic metals, and specifically cadmium. And also, I should also put up, right after this video, I'll put up another video in which I review my favorite coca supplements. And within that video, I don't think I review coca chips, chocolate chips, but I can if you'd like. just comment on the comment section below. Sorry guys, my video shut off again. I'm very technologically incapable, just like Greg actually often says he is. But to put it simply, it's a little careless to recommend to viewers, to readers, to use cocoa powders, cooking cocoa powders, chocolate chips, even dark chocolate bars, and even cocoa supplements without checking through a third party their cadmium levels. Most of them are actually beyond the levels that are considered acceptable and therefore present a serious point of toxicity for us. So many people think they're being healthy when they eat dark chocolate bars that they buy at Whole Foods, but most of those bars have toxic levels of cadmium. In fact, the organic ones have more toxic levels than the inorganic ones, surprisingly. So I have reviewed some of the cocoa products in the video I mentioned earlier, but if you guys are interested in buying chocolate chips that have somewhat acceptable, those ones are never really great, but somewhat acceptable levels of cadmium, you can comment on the section down below and I'll give you a direct link to a third-party reviewed one. And the same goes for the cocoa powder or any of the other products that he uses. So that's one thing. Another thing is, of course, again, he didn't mention the cooking spray, so it's not paying really much attention to this opportunity to influence people's health. And another thing I didn't mention about the cocoa powder is that it's not just the cadmium, but cocoa powders have differing amounts of phytochemicals. You guys may know that coca is healthy for you. It's actually very healthy. One of the most interesting sources of phytochemicals that we know of. But the amount of phytochemicals that are important in the coca really depends on the brand. Even in the supplemental versions, there's a wide discrepancy, and that holds true for the coca powders and for the other brands as well. So it's really something one wants to get into, and this is why I always say that coaches, especially coaches that pride themselves on writing diets for people or supplement programs, should always have a subscription to a third-party review service for supplements, and should be aware of what kind of heavy metals or toxic substances may be in different kinds of supplements, as well as ingredients that are used in food. Because this is sort of, I mean, what value can we really add if we're not telling people what is dangerous about what they're eating? So that's one thing. The second thing is the protein bar in general is incredibly processed food. I mean, the whole thing is just a big processed bar. And we'll get into processed stuff later. As I said, this video is a little bit long. But, you know, what I said here as a concluding remark is, at best, this is a suboptimal dish. At worst, it presents a genuinely risky, toxic processed food. And as I said, the isomaltol oligosaccharide is creative, and I admire that. However, the problem with the coca is not isolated. Throughout his cookbook, coca is a reoccurring theme, and throughout never specified what kind of coca, and not even mentioning the danger with the cadmium. And this is not nitpicking, of course. There are only 4 toxic metals we have to be worried about, including mercury and these kind of toxic metals. And everybody knows about that for fish, but people don't realize the cadmium levels in coca. And any kind of person who's into nutrition really should. And this is not I'm not trying to denigrate Greg's knowledge or anything like that. I'm just bringing this to your attention as viewers so that you can learn also from this review, and you yourself know to be concerned about coca products and to always research. And what you try to do is you try to get the most phytochemicals for the least cadmium, so you get the most bang for your buck. Now, the 6th recipe that we're going to cover has been discussed a lot on Greg's channel recently. It's called apple goop, and he actually had, I think, a few other people that were discussing his cookbook cook it, and he discussed it, and then recently he made his own video of it. So originally, this is what I thought the recipe was. I thought that it was apples that are chopped. He didn't specify to peel the apples, so I assumed he didn't peel them. And then mixed oats, an unknown sweetener, he doesn't specify, and cinnamon. And these things are blended together, and then gum is added, and they're microwaved on high for an unspecified amount of time, which is why I think a lot of the people that bought his cookbook were making it, as he says, wrong, because he didn't specify how long it should be microwaved for in the first place. So the ingredients, as I said, an unknown brand of oats. Now, I'm not going to get into this here, but oats also have another issue with them. In fact, a frequent guest on my podcast, Jerry Brainham, has a video dedicated to this. You can go to his channel, Jerry Brainham, and search oats, and you'll find a dedicated video on that subject, but I'm not going to get into this here because other people have before me. So the other thing is that apples, he did not specify if the apples should be organic or not, and he also doesn't specify what species or cultivar of apple they should use. Finally, again, unknown sweetener, a kind of gum, and cinnamon. So what are the positives of apple goop? First of all, he did not remove the pulp, at least. So removing the pulp, which means creating a juice, reduces the phenolic compounds, which are phytochemicals, in the apple by about 40%. So at least he has the pulp there. He did not advise people to remove the peel on the recipe. However, as I later saw in his video, he actually has removed the peel himself, so I'm not sure about that one. The third good thing is he included cinnamon. Cinnamon is a very powerful spice and a very useful spice, and I'm happy that I think this is the only situation in his cookbook, but don't quote me on that, in which he did specify a spice, and it is a good one. He also, a great point is he microwaved the apples. So microwaving is much better than cooking the apples through any other measure. It does not diminish the polyphenol or antioxidant quality as much as any other cooking method. So that was the best cooking method that could be used to retain the health value of the apple. However, as I said, so first of all, non-organic apples can be dangerous. And if you guys want to understand more about how organic food or non-organic food affects health, you can see the video I linked earlier, or you can go on my channel and just search organic food in the search button. So I won't get into that right now, but the most interesting thing is he didn't specify the apple cultivar variety. So I found this a little odd because the phytochemicals, which means the health value that comes from apples, really depends on the species, but it also depends on the climate and the soil in which they're grown on. So there is a little bit of issues there. Now, I don't expect everyone to specify which climate or country or which year the apple to come in. Of course, I don't do that myself, and that's too much. But we definitely could say certain species of apples are better than others. So I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a short lecture on this subject, and the only reason why is because I used to eat apples a lot myself, and because I was eating apples a lot, I wanted to, as I do always, optimize my diet for the health value. So I researched it. It took a little while, and I assume Greg has not done this himself. Otherwise, he would have specified which apples. At least he could have written, even if he leaves it open to you, he could have written like, you know, this apple may be better than that apple, but it's up to you with taste. So, first thing is, I wanted you guys to know that apples are a powerful food. They had the second highest phenolic content in one study second highest phenolic content, second highest antioxidant power, and the third highest anti-proliferative power against liver cancer cells. So they're quite potent. They were only beaten by cranberry and lemons in one study. Now this study doesn't include all fruits, but they did beat oranges, grapefruit, strawberry, banana, red grape, peach, and pears. So they are quite nutritious, even though they are well known to be a negative calorie food, which means after you finish eating an apple, when you eat it properly, not in a goop form, you supposedly don't actually net gain calories. So apples are also a good source of well-known phytochemicals. I'm going to list some of them for you and tell you about the ratios that they're in it. So first of all, they have procyanins, they have catechins. Now you guys may have heard of catechins before because of epicatechins in green tea. They also have rutin and quercetin. And as I mentioned earlier, quercetin is something that many of us supplement with, including myself and all of my clients who can afford it. So the quercetin content in apples is actually responsible for double the antioxidant power of the epicatechin and of the procyanin amount. But it's also triple the antioxidant power of the vitamin C. So the apple, you can think of it as a quercetin-rich and dominant phytochemical and antioxidant fruit. So that's one thing. The second thing I want to tell you about is the different species, and this will be useful for people who do eat apples or who do make the apple goop. You can make yourself a healthier version of an apple goop. So I'll quote a couple of studies just to let you guys know. One study in Chile, which I'll link to down below, shows that the red delicious variety has a higher polyphenol content or phenolic content and a higher antioxidant power than the Granny Smith apples, than the Fuji apples. By the way, I personally like the Granny Smith apples, but I don't eat them because of this reason. The Royal Gala apples or the Pink Lady apples. I'll probably include a graph here to show you how different they are. Now, in terms of antioxidant content, using the FRAP assay, there are more than one assay for antioxidant measures, but the red delicious apples had almost double the power of the Granny Smith apples. So just to put that into perspective. Now, there's another study I can maybe quote here that shows that the red delicious apples had the highest phenolic content and antioxidant power among those studied. However, once you start including a couple of other apples, you'll see in the study I quote here that the Eda red apples had a higher phenolic content and antioxidant power than the red delicious apples. And I'll quote a more comprehensive study here that will show that the crab apples actually have the highest of both, and then the Eda red apples, and then the red delicious apples. And that tends to be the rule. Now, some people don't like to eat crab apples because they have a little bit of a different taste, and Eda red apples are not always readily available at your local store, but you'll be able to usually find red delicious apples, which, as I said, I don't think are as delicious as the Granny Smith apples, but they are more than double more powerful. So it's quite significant. Also, I should quote a study here that will show you that in chili, the amount of phenolic compounds and antioxidant power of the apples really depends not just on where in Chile they're grown, but also on the year. And so sometimes apples that are similar in their phenolic content, one will be more powerful than others. So you can't completely optimize, but the red delicious apples and the Eda red and the crab apples are so far beyond all the other apples. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The second thing is removing the skin. So in the video, he does remove the skin of the apples, and this I felt was a major mistake, especially when you're making a kind of goop kind of thing where probably you could get away with not removing the skin. And the reason why is because the highest concentration of phytochemicals and antioxidant power is actually in the skin. And I'll use some specific numbers here, which will depend on the individual cultivar of apples. So the peel contains 2 to 6 more times more phenolic content than the entire interior of the apple. 2 to 6 times. It has 2 to 3 times more flavonoids than what's called the flesh, the interior of the apple. And it also has 2 to 6 times more antioxidant potential than the interior of the apple. So that is at least double in some cultivars, up to 6 times more. So the skin is worth 6 of those. And it also has, unlike the actual interior of the apple, it is truly nutrient dense. Again, Greg likes the word dense. Well, the skin is dense, but the actual inside, maybe you could consider it dense compared to a bread, but it's not dense compared to the skin. The skin is very dense. The inside has more of the sugars and that kind of stuff. So he's throwing away the densest part of the food there. I don't know if I was going to mention this, but there's a study on rats in which they show that rats fed apple peels. They compared rats fed apple peels to rats fed the flesh of the apple, and the ones who had the apple peels had less lipid peroxidation, which is something important to bodybuilders because when your LDL gets oxidized, that's when you end up developing plaque. So the skins had much more power for that. They also increased the antioxidant quality of the plasma or the blood of the rats. So I'll include a citation, of course, here also. And finally, well, I don't know if this finally, he also blended the apples, and this hasn't, so it became an apple puree, that's what they call it. And this brings up another issue, which is that usually when you blend something, it gets absorbed much quicker. And this is a little bit of an issue. Number one, it is known to decrease satiety, but that's not such a big issue. A lot of his foods are satiating and high in volume. This is sort of a dessert kind of thing, or I don't know if it's a snack or a dessert, but it's something like that. But more importantly, it increases serum insulin levels more, the puree, than the whole apple, but less than the apple juice. And so I'll include a citation here also so you guys can see that. Finally, last recipe, which is the blueberry protein shake. Now this recipe isn't that bad. I just wanted to be fair so I could include some of the good recipes or relatively good recipes that are in his book. So first of all, this includes again his rice or RYCE chocolate peanut butter cup whey protein powder, which again has unknown coca ingredients in it, probably very high in cadmium, and sucralose, as I mentioned earlier, which I'm not against. He includes as ingredients frozen blueberries, but unfortunately again does not specify if they are organic or not. And frozen blueberries, by the way, are the kind of fruit that you should get organic or probably not get at all, because even though they're very powerful, it's debatable, but the pesticide residue on them is significant. I've looked into this myself because I eat blueberries every day and they are much cheaper, obviously. He also includes gum and unsweetened almond milk. And this is a shake, basically. So the positives of it are blueberries are, in my opinion, the most powerful fruit of all for health. I eat blueberries, as I said, every day. They have tremendous benefits. One day I'll make a video on blueberries so people can realize blueberries are more powerful than any supplement you can take. They're extremely powerful. And by the way, to his credit, throughout his cookbook, he often has blueberries mentioned in his recipes. They're also in his breakfast recipes, and sometimes they're not even cooked. They're just put on top of like his French toast, on top of the French toast and stuff. So, and he does pick blueberries, and blueberries, as I said, the number one. But he also includes strawberries and other ones. Strawberries are way less powerful than, for example, cranberries or other kinds of berries. So, but the blueberries are there, and that is to his credit. The problem with this shake, number one, as I said, non-organic blueberries could be dangerous. Number two, the cocoa powder and the rice protein powder likely contains an unacceptable level of cadmium. However, maybe they put very little cocoa powder, so overall it's not that bad, but it's definitely not the best cocoa powder you can use, I assume. Otherwise, they would specify it on the protein. The third thing is the medium-sized protein shake here has 39 grams of protein, so that's a lot of protein. Now, when you consume protein at a high amount, what happens is it increases the filtration rate of the kidneys. And over time, nephrologists, which are kidney doctors, believe that this hyperfiltration leads to hypertrophy of the kidney. And as the kidney grows, there's something called glomeruli. I always mispronounce this thing. Glomeruli. And these glomeruli basically break and they disattach from each other, and this creates something called glomerular sclerosis. So there's atherosclerosis for your arteries, and there's glomerular sclerosis for your kidneys. And it is believed by nephrologists, and I do have a video on kidneys. I should link it here. The video is mostly about anabolic steroids affecting kidneys, but in that video you can see that basically the most expert nephrologists in the world agree that the kidney damage happening to bodybuilders is not just due to the steroids, which are of course kidney toxic, acutely cytotoxic to the kidneys, but also more importantly, they're due to the size of the bodybuilders, the blood pressure, and the protein intake, and they do not take the protein intake lightly. So this is a serious concern, especially when I speculate. Now I have no evidence for this, but I speculate that when you take whey protein, the speed at which the kidney must filter the protein must be even more taxing to the kidney. And as we know, kidneys do not recover. So this is the only issue. So personally, I'm a little bit against using whey protein, but especially if you're not using it with a fat. And there is no fat here in general. Greg's diet is very low in fats. So the other thing I wanted to say is the frozen blueberries, as I said, are great, but when you blend them, they absorb much quicker. And as Rick Johnson from University of Colorado has eloquently described in his book, I'll put the book up here for you guys. You should really read that book. Basically, fruit juices, when consumed as juices, even with the pulp, they are often absorbed very quickly to the point that instead of being healthful, they become a little bit harmful and can lead to, because of the fructose and the glucose combined together, can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which of course precedes type 2 diabetes. So personally, I eat a lot of fruits, but I absolutely never blend them. The other thing is, I should mention Louis Cantley. Louis Cantley of Cornell, he's one of the foremost researchers in cancer in the world. He has a paper, I'll link the paper here, in which he describes the particular dangers that are associated with in a liquid form. Because in a liquid form, in terms of cancers, because it goes particularly quickly through the digestive system and is able to cause eventually colorectal cancer for that reason. So this is a really interesting subject published in the last few years. Finally, the almond milk, the almond milk and the protein are both highly processed foods. A good thing about the almond milk, it has less protein than normal milk. So finally, we get to the end of the video, for those that bared with me. And I'm sorry for talking so slowly. Again, as I said, I am fasting. But this is the most important part of the video. I'm going to discuss with you guys my critique of the diet that may come from using a book like this in terms of health. And, I'll tell you, here's the good news. If you have good genetics, and if you don't live an unhealthy lifestyle, and if you're young, this diet probably isn't very unhealthy. In fact, well, except for the protein content and because of all the snacks and stuff, the implication that you're not ever not eating for very long. And anyone who follows Greg's channel knows that he is not a fan of any kind of fasting, and he also believes that you should eat very frequently during the day. So that's the problem. But to be honest, if somebody is obese, or if somebody is very young and they're eating like KFC all the time, this may be a healthy diet for them. Particularly obesity, well, yeah, I'll get into it in a second. So, but if you have bad genetics, what would be considered bad genetics, I hate this term, but if you have genetics that are not if you have bad genetics for cancer, or if you don't have longevity genes, then this diet may not only not be helpful, but it may not be giving you the tools in terms of phytochemicals and other things that can help you, and it may be actually harming your health with the meal frequency, with the protein, with the simple carbs in terms of the bread that is hyperinsulinemic. So let's get into the details. So the diet that would come out of this cookbook would be low calorie and have palatable foods. What's commendable about this is it's easier to diet if the food tastes good. So if somebody is obese and they have low willpower and they don't practice fasting, for example, it's much easier if the food tastes good. So that's one thing. And obesity is clearly harmful to health. I'll link a study here, but you all know obesity is harmful to health. Moreover, adipose tissue, which means fat, actually causes chronic inflammation in the body. And chronic inflammation is harmful for a variety of reasons, and it also causes insulin resistance. Just having fat causes insulin resistance. So Greg Doucette's main pitch on his channel is to be low body fat, and I think he equates this to health. It is not necessarily equated to health in the whole society, but obesity is unhealthy, right? But it doesn't mean if you are low body fat that you are healthy. So it's all a matter of relative measures. So maybe he's thinking about people who are obese, or who have very bad health, or who ate McDonald's every day, or who don't know how to cook, and in that case, this is very commendable. Another thing that's great about his diet is it is generally low calorie. Calorie restriction is one of the only methods that has been shown to extend life across all species studied. However, it seems to be dependent a little bit on having low protein in your diet. And Greg's diet, of course, has very high protein. So the next thing I want to talk about is now this is less positive, is that the diet is insulinogenic, which means it will cause people to have higher insulin levels after they eat. And in the long term, this could lead to something called hyperinsulinemia. Now, hyperinsulinemia is associated with cancer. It is associated with the development of type 2 diabetes, of course. It's associated with atherosclerotic plaque development under some conditions, though, with that said, caveat. And it's also associated with neurodegenerative disease, specifically with Alzheimer's disease, quite strongly. So generally, we say that the biggest concern with insulin is cancer. But sometimes we think that eating those kind of diets that promote insulin, like for example, one of the reasons that the ketogenic diet, although there's more than one reason, is considered by some to be cancer protective. For some cancers, not all cancers, like brain cancers, not so much, but other cancers, is because of the reduction in insulin. So a lot of people who specialize in cancer believe that insulin is one of the biggest drivers for cancer growth. So there's a lot of bread here and starches which cause that. The other thing that starches do, as I mentioned earlier, is they increase the proportion of small, dense lipoprotein particles, which are much more likely to turn into plaque than the large, buoyant ones. So the more bread you eat, the more likely you are to have this. You might have a low LDL cholesterol level in general, but you may have a higher proportion of them that are small and dense, whereas somebody else may have more LDL cholesterol, especially when you're not doing the particle count, the way Greg was on his blood work. He was doing an LDL estimation, by the way, but of the LDL cholesterol. So a large buoyant LDL particle has more cholesterol, so you may have less particles and less opportunity for them to get lodged in the arterial wall, and also they may be easier to get out of the bloodstream. Whereas you may have a lower LDL cholesterol because each of the small particles carries less cholesterol, but you may have many particles and they may be difficult to get out of the bloodstream. So that's why personally I would stay away from bread and a simple carbohydrate, especially the white bread. But to Greg's credit, he does give you an option of using Ezekiel bread, and he does use that high protein bread, which is probably not very healthy and is extremely processed. So another thing is the high protein food. So I've been mentioning throughout this video why protein is unhealthy, but I haven't gone into the details of it. Basically, there's two reasons. One I mentioned is the kidney function already. We've talked about that. The glomerulosclerosis, or the hyperfiltration of the kidney that leads eventually to kidney damage. The second one is aging. And I'm going to cite a paper right here. Look at the paper, maybe pause the video, and go read that paper, because it may be a little bit difficult to read if you don't read science papers often. It's a paper I recently sent to another very well-known coach who was asking about whether protein does harm health and how it does. And this paper, although it's not very well, it's not cited often, it is a great introduction, a review of why we think, or not we, I'm not a researcher, but why people interested in longevity believe that protein in general ages the body faster. And not just through the kidneys, but cellularly for various reasons. Not just one reason. So check out that paper and you'll understand why having a high protein diet is specifically not healthful. Although it may keep you at a lower body weight, by the way. So see, that's where the dichotomy comes between looking healthy and being healthy. You can look healthy and not be healthy, of course. And we know this because bodybuilders and fitness people often look healthy, but they often die left and right or have serious health conditions. And that's because looking healthy doesn't mean you're healthy. Although obviously if you're very obese, you're also very unhealthy. So the next thing is that the diet encourages snacking. And snacking is a little bit of a problem because it reduces the amount that you can fast even during the day. The impact on this is that even shorter fasts are known to be helpful. I'll cite a study here from Walter Longo, but of course extended fasts are very helpful, which Greg disagrees about, and I've already made a video on that. The second problem with this frequent meal timing is that it impairs metabolic function. So I won't cite a study here. I'll actually put a picture up of Sachin Panda's amazing, very readable, anyone can read this book called The Circadian Code, in which he describes his momentous, life-changing, for all of us, research in the circadian rhythms of the body. Specifically, he shows that essentially he studies a lot about, he's the godfather of circadian rhythms in the literature. Circadian rhythms means how your body functions different biologically. Circadium, which is a Latin for around the day. So in the morning your body functions a certain way, and at night it does it a different way. And what he's discovered is that your body has not just a central circadian clock, but different organs have their own clocks. The liver has a clock, the pancreas has a clock, the gastrointestinal system has a clock. And when you eat beyond, for example, like an 8-hour window of the day, you become basically progressively more insulin resistant through the day as the day goes on. So when you eat for a very long time, through the day, you basically end up impairing your digestive system and your insulin sensitivity. So that's the other problem there. The next problem is that the processed foods. Basically, I don't know if this needs explanation. Obviously, not all processed foods are created equal, but there is absolutely no question that processed foods are strongly associated with cancer. I'll link a study here also, but everybody knows that. Then the liquid meals, as I said, I mentioned this earlier, but the liquid meals make digestion faster. So if you are eating something that's carb heavy without fats, you get a higher insulin spike right afterwards. This is not always the case, but it is often the case. And that's why we stay away from, for example, fruit juices, and we eat the whole fruits instead. Second last thing, his food is not nutrient dense. As I said earlier, he has a different understanding of the word dense than I do. Of course, this is just a communication issue. But I think what he means is that his food is, sorry, my camera cut out again. What I mean is, he doesn't even mean maybe macronutrient dense. I think he just means high volume for low calories. I think that's what he means. But his food is certainly not nutrient dense in any sense of the word. There's a lot of bread, there's a lot of whey protein. These are things that take calories and provide very little nutritional value. Maybe they provide, I don't know if they add vitamins to his breads. They're very processed. They may be fortified, but vitamins aren't all that matters, as we discussed. It's all about the phytochemicals, and his food is very low in phytochemicals in general. And finally, missed health opportunities. That's what I call this. So In my opinion, the lack of optimization of the cooking oils, it was a big opportunity to give his readership some healthful advice. He could research the different effects of different kinds of cooking oils and select the one that he considers to be the most healthful. And also the cooking methods. So he chose a lot of cooking methods that, as I described in detail earlier, some of them, for example, the apple goop was good. He chose a microwave, but some of them were not so great. For example, the boiling the cauliflower and potatoes should have been steamed or really even microwaved, but definitely not boiled. That was the worst way to cook them to keep the phytochemicals there. So if you think you're eating vegetables that have a lot of nutrients, you may be getting 30 or 40% of the nutrients you would have gotten if you had just chosen a different cooking method. So to me, if it's a cookbook and it's a health cookbook, it should really be really advanced. It should be maybe not too difficult for people to read, but it should give tips, you know, even if you don't want to cite them, just give a tip. Oh, if you steam this, you'll have more phytochemicals. But if you don't like that, you could boil it. You know, it's up to you. That's what I would have done personally. There was, again, no optimization of spices. A lot of the instructions mention spices of your choice. I feel like there was an opportunity there to mention the value of different spices. To his credit, Greg once used cinnamon. Cinnamon is a great spice. Again, no optimization of phytochemicals. So, like for example, he mentioned at one point, use half a cup or whatever of vegetables, but doesn't say which vegetables. And in general, the vegetables and fruits are not chosen for their health value, from what I can tell, except for the blueberries, which definitely are a great addition as long as they were organic. So, what do I think about this in general? So, for those of you who got so far through the video, I'm probably very boring today because I'm fasting and I'm very mellow, but for those of you who got through the video, what do I think of the cookbook overall? So, number one, I think it's good for maybe young people who don't have time to cook or don't know how to cook. The recipes are very easy to make, certainly, and don't require much time. It's probably good for aesthetics. If you're probably mostly interested in being thinner, as long as you don't develop insulin resistance from all the bread over time, and as long as you're someone who can digest bread very well. Not everybody can, by the way. For example, I can't. But if you are, then this diet may be good for your aesthetics. It may be also good for losing body fat for people who are obese, because it'll keep you full, as he always says. Definitely, it's large portions. The wraps and things like that are large portions and relatively lower calorie. Of course, you could get more filled, at least, by eating raw fruits and vegetables, but you may because you may be addicted mentally to the taste of food, which is where this diet comes in. If you're addicted mentally through dopamine, because food affects dopamine, especially fats and sugars affect dopamine. So if you're addicted to it in that sense, you need something that tastes really well, and that this may work very much for that. So I think that was his goal, and I think he succeeded in that respect. Now, in terms of health, he does mention a healthy lifestyle and stuff like that. It is certainly not optimized for health, and I did mention what I think about that earlier. But it is not optimized. There were a lot of missed opportunities, what I would say. Now, is it the cancer cookbook? No, I would say no. Now, certainly it does. We mentioned the iron in there. We mentioned the highly processed foods. We mentioned the hyperinsulinemia that it can cause. But is it worse than going to KFC or McDonald's or ordering Pizza Hut if that's what you do? No, it's not the cancer cookbook for that. But I somewhat regret saying that word, because I looked at it and it's not so bad, but definitely someone could make the case that it is not a healthy book, and definitely for people who are predisposed to cancer, it is not the way to go, that's for sure, because of what I just mentioned, the iron, not just the iron, the iron's in the bison, but the whole diet is processed foods, basically. And we know processed foods are associated with cancer for sure. So that's one thing. Now, is it worth $100? Maybe, very much so. I mean, for example, my consultation charges are very cheap, but for $100, you only get to speak to me for half an hour. With $100 in this cookbook, you have the book. If you're someone who doesn't know how to cook or doesn't know how to make tasty meals out of healthy things, or you're not that concerned about health, you're concerned about the way you look, or if you're obese, why not? Why wouldn't you spend $100 on an ebook? Because you have it forever and you can use it, and I bet you'll probably like the recipes. So I originally thought it was overpriced. I don't think so anymore, right? And it's very entertaining and easy to read, as I mentioned earlier. Now, is it healthy? I'm about maximizing health span. I'm not about choosing the best of bad alternatives. I always think that we can live our best lives in terms of health and longevity. Will this take you there? Certainly not. There's no way. But if you're a person of half measures and you just want, you know, something quick and easy and something tasty, and you want to enjoy yourself but, you know, don't want to be very fat, then yeah, it certainly is a valid use of your money. Finally, as a side note for my regular viewers, actually, as I was reading this book, I started realizing maybe I should write a cookbook. Now, I'm not great at cooking, but the reason why is because, not I, but me and Lucie, my wife, because Lucie's actually really into doing this kind of stuff, like making, obviously it's less healthy than the food I regularly eat, but she basically tries to make once in a while for herself usually, and sometimes I eat with her, food that tastes good but still has a lot of phytochemicals, is still optimized to provide as much health value as it can. And she has so many recipes, and she's so good at this, and I was always trying to get her to come on my channel and show some cooking recipes, but at the time she wasn't so interested. Now hopefully when she opens her own channel she might start doing that. So I was reading through this and I thought I should make a cookbook that's optimized for phytochemical content, saying exactly, you know, why would I choose this fruit over that one, why would I choose this vegetable over that one, how could I make them taste good if you need them to taste good. So for example, for me, I don't care that much, but I understand there's a demand for that, and my wife cares about that. So there's that, and then also as I said, the cooking method, the different ingredients, and optimizing it for taste. So I may look into doing that maybe in the next year. This really inspired me, but I'm glad I got to review this. As I said, I did it because people were asking me about it. I hope if Greg does see this video, he doesn't take it as a disrespectful video at all. As I said, I admire his powerlifting work especially, and I think he's an intelligent person. I do think he doesn't read much about health, but he doesn't have much time, and I know he's always been mostly focused on bodybuilding and fitness. And for that regard, I don't find anything he says ridiculous at all. Some of it is just a little bit simplified for the common audience, which makes sense because he's a large channel and he's trying to, as he says, help the most people that he can. Now, I wouldn't consider it health because it's not so much health, it's more about bodybuilding or how to look good. But that's also help in a way, because people care about how they look good and that gives them happiness. So there's nothing to take away from Greg in this regard. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something from it, and I'll see you next time.